Calling strangers over your house when you're alone is a big dumb move, since you knowing for sure if they are a good person or not isn't an option when it's the first time you've met them. Anyway, I have learned this the hard way, so now I'm trying to warn others for doing something stupid before they end up regretting it. My house is pretty big for someone who lives in solitude. My daughters used to be here to fill it up with their laughs and chatters, but ever since I sent them off to the university hostel, it had become quite lonely. I married at the age of 21 when I was first pregnant with Louise. While my marriage was mostly because of my baby, I still felt grateful toward Kent when he was man enough to take me as his responsibility when he couldn't just deny it, saying it was a silly mistake on his part. As time passed, I grew to love my husband, watching him to be a good, responsible dad, and I'm sure he felt the same way looking at the amount of love he showered me with. 2 years into our marriage, and I was once again pregnant with Avery, and he lavished me with gifts. He didn't let me lift a single finger throughout the pregnancy, and was always there for my every single need. Man, oh man, if this man could get any more lovable and charming, I don't know if you'd believe me, but even in that condition, I would get wildly turned on by his simple gestures. Even after the delivery, he didn't change one bit, and not even 2 more years later, the man continued making me feel like the most loved woman on the planet, even as our daughters started to grow older and join school, until one day, he received a great opportunity from one of the biggest companies. It was basically his dream job, but he was hesitating to accept it since he would need to move to a different country to work, and we had built up our lives here. I tried talking to the girls to see if they wanted to move, but they strongly opposed it, and I saw his face drop in sadness. After dinner, as the two of us were in the kitchen doing dishes together, I turned to him, grabbed his hand, and said, "You should go." He looked at me in confusion, trying to figure out if I wanted him out of the kitchen or something. "You need to move to Mexico for the job, right?" The moment I said that, his eyes lit up for a few seconds. "I cannot leave you and the kids behind all alone." He turned back to put the dishes in the washer as we were done cleaning them by hand. "We won't have to be alone. I'll take care of the kids. Besides, I won't let you spend a single holiday there." I turned him toward me and hugged him. "I won't. I promise to be at home at every single one of them." I could feel him smile while dropping tears as he hugged me back. The man has almost sacrificed his life to make me and the kids happy through and through, so why couldn't I be the bigger person for once and let him pursue his dream? I was confident that at the end of the day, this man would be back in my arms because we were his home. He accepted the offer and had to move to Mexico within 15 days. Everything went so fast that it felt like a dream, but once he was gone, it felt too real. He kept his promise and never missed coming home on a holiday with trunks full of gifts for girls, and he would always say he missed me to death. Every time we made love felt like the first time. The longing, the craving, it all made it more exciting each time. But once he was gone, time would feel as if it was at a halt, if not for the girls making me busy with their shenanigans. Then finally came the day when both of them were accepted to the universities and went off to stay in the hostel. Sending them off was the hardest thing I had to do, even harder than when I sent my husband, because then I knew that I would have my children to keep my mind occupied. But once my girls were gone too, I became completely alone. Kent asked me over the phone calls multiple times if I was doing okay, and since I didn't want to worry him, I kept saying I was. I started to become used to the loneliness with time and kept my head busy with housework and my hobby, which was shoe designing. As I mentioned earlier, my house was big, so there was a lawn surrounded by beautiful plants, which was my doing due to boredom. There was a pipe leakage recently, so the lawn pipe, which was making it problematic for me. I tried talking to a few local plumbers, but they all said they needed to dig up the pipe to check the main issue. And since I didn't want to destroy my beautiful lawn, I was trying to look for an alternative. That was when I went on Craigslist and found a contact number of a handyman. I tried calling him, and unlike other plumbers, he picked up on the second ring. I explained the situation, and he told me that it would be solved easily without the need to dig up anything. It came as a relief to me at the time, thinking my lawn wouldn't have to suffer the consequences of the leaked pipe. I mean, the guy said that it was a relatively simple job to do. I had no idea about any of that stuff, so whatever he gave me, I simply ate it up and believed him. The appointment was set for tomorrow, and I mentioned the address along with lines that it would be hard for him to find it, so he needed to give a call before heading out for me to share my location. First thing in the morning the next day, I received a phone call from him as he told me he was outside. I looked at the time and it was 7 in the morning. Even my birds weren't awake yet, but still, I thought the dude must be completely dedicated to his work. Instead of being shocked and creeped out by the fact that he found my house just with that rough address, I was impressed. I buzzed him in and showed him to the lawn, but instead of taking a look at the leaked pipe, he said he needed to look around other pipes as well to check the actual problem. The way he was inspecting the pipes, he seemed legit, so I let him do his work and went ahead to get freshened up, as I had just been woken up by this guy. As I got out of bed, I was shocked to see him inside the bedroom checking every single thing. It alarmed me. "What are you doing?" I asked in a hesitant voice. "Ma'am, do you have a wrench?" He knew I saw him, but the abrupt change of subject disconcerted me. "Yes, but you could have waited out in the hall to ask me that." My displeased voice made him change his expression, which I noticed from the corner of my eye as I exited the bedroom, and he followed me. Asking him to stay right here in the kitchen, I went to the storeroom to get what he asked for. But as I was looking for the wrench, I felt a presence right behind me. He was standing so close to me that I could feel his breathing over me. I was so panicked that I could not speak for a few seconds as my hands were in the drawer. I touched something very metallic and grabbed it immediately, making myself ready to defend in case the creep pulled anything. "Ma'am, did you find the wrench?" he asked in a deep, heavy voice which sent chills down my spine. At this point, I didn't want to give him something he could use to kill me, so I shook my head no. "Can you wait outside while I look?" I asked in a slow, trembling voice as my words barely came out of my mouth. "No, I'll stay here," he replied. At this point, I was too terrified to continue looking, so I pulled whatever I found in the drawer and made a run for it. As I got outside the house, I called my neighbor Mark over right away and told him that the man was weird. He asked him to leave, but the man said he wouldn't leave until he fixed the pipe and gets his payment for that, and despite several threats received by my neighbor, he still fixed the pipe. Mark was there the entire time that handyman did his work, and when I handed him the money, as he was leaving, he kept giving me a creepy stare, but instead of that, he did nothing else. I thanked Mark for his help as he left, and went inside my home, locking every single door behind me. I was too scared to not tell Ken about everything, even though I didn't want to make him worry. He suggested that I don't call anyone inside any longer, and that if there's anything that needs repair, he would do it because he'd be coming back for a long vacation. I was finally able to sleep after hearing his reassuring words. Nothing out of the ordinary happened after that, nor did I ever see that man, or heard from him, which is a relief, but I still sometimes wonder what would have happened if Mark didn't come. Was there an ulterior motive he was hiding, or was he just that creepy? Even if he had no intention of harming me, there were too many red flags for me to ignore.
"Didn't you work at a strip club?" As I was taking an order from a customer, he suddenly asked, looking at me curiously, as if he was trying to recognize me from somewhere. His question turned the heads of the other employees in my direction, which made me feel embarrassed. "I'm sorry, sir. I think you're mistaking me for someone else. Your total is $13.97. So, do you want to pay through cash, card, or online?" I tried to avoid any further questions and hurried with his order. Looking at the long line behind him, he didn't say anything else and just went back to take a seat. But while he was sitting there, he continued staring at me, which made me feel uncomfortable. I had put my past life behind me and did the unthinkable to hide it from everyone so that I can live a decent life peacefully. But if someone reveals it like this, it would ruin everything that I had worked so hard for. I used to work at a strip club in Las Vegas a few years back before I moved to New York. And even though I only did stripping for only a few months or so, the stain of being this kind of girl just doesn't go away. Society doesn't look at the girls who used to strip naked to earn money the same way they do to others. So I had no other choice but to hide my unpleasant past to start anew. But that past I tried to erase had come back to haunt me. Why is he still not leaving? I bit my lips out of anxiousness. The way he was still staring while sitting there even after finishing his food was making me feel even more uneasy. But I still tried my best to ignore the man and continued working. Whenever our eyes met, he would smile at me like we were some old acquaintance or something, and it was starting to get on my nerves. He didn't wait much longer, though, and left after an hour or so. That made me feel relieved. But when I got off work and was walking back home, I noticed him waiting for me around the corner of the antique store. I wanted to turn back, but that would only confirm his suspicions, so I continued walking. "Are you sure we haven't met before?" He blocked my way and asked as he leaned to my face level. I swear I wanted to punch this creep, but since I did not want to create a scene, I tried to walk away from him. But he didn't let me and continued to block me. "Let's not do this, darling. We both know I'm right about you being a stripper. Now, if you don't want the little image that you have maintained here to get ruined, you'll quietly follow me." As he said that, I looked around and saw a few people from work looking at me, wondering who this man was. "Yes, sure, sir. I'll show you where the nearest subway is, since I'm headed the same way." Filled with indignation, I said this a little louder for them to hear and started walking with him. I could see the nasty smile on his face that was infuriating me, but I controlled my maniacal urges and followed him silently. The place he was leading me to did not look like a good neighborhood. There must be at least 5 abandoned houses we passed, and the people walking in the area looked shady as hell. "Where do you think you're taking me?" I finally opened my mouth to ask him that. The bastard looked at me with his foul smile and said, "You'll know soon. And if you don't want your little secret exposed, you'll keep following me." I clenched my fists, controlling my homicidal tendencies, and gave him the fakest smile I could. He led me inside the building, and when we entered an apartment that resembled a garbage can, he locked the door behind us. I turned to look at what he was doing, and as I predicted, he lunged at me in an attempt to rip my clothes, which I successfully managed to avoid. He must be delusional into thinking I followed him because he had the upper hand on me, but he had no idea what my true intentions were, and foolishly led me to a neighborhood filled with crimes. How dare this evil-smelling, malicious man try to take advantage of me? Does he think I'm an easy target just because I used to work at a strip club? I muttered in a barely audible voice, thinking how cruel fate is to women. "What did you just say?" he asked in a pissed tone, which made me look him in the eye and sigh a bit louder before speaking. "If you know me, then you probably know Bill too, right?" I looked directly into his eyes. "Are you talking about the manager of the club?" he replied hesitantly. "Do you want to know how he died?" He took a step back as he saw the maniacal expression on my face. I did not want to do this anymore, but it's bad that I have to kill you now. As I said that, I noticed him getting ready to escape, so I kicked him behind the knees, making him fall on all fours, and then I rushed at him, putting him in a headlock. "Please don't hurt me. I swear I would stay quiet as a mouse. I won't tell anyone about any of your secrets. So please, let me go." I glared at him for a few seconds before bursting out in laughter. I couldn't believe this idiot thought I'm doing this because of my secrets. "That is not why you're going to die," I whispered in his ears as I stopped laughing. Ha! He was about to turn back, but before he could say anything else, I twisted his neck in a swift motion and broke it. As I released him from my grip, he fell lifeless on the ground. It was comical that his last thought must be why he was getting killed without even realizing it was because he tried to take advantage of a helpless girl with her past as an excuse. These are the times when being the daughter of a gymnast and a martial artist pays off, but they'll never know what I have been doing with the skills they taught me. I knew I was going to get caught this time, but I didn't care. Even left the body as it was lying around in the middle of an abandoned apartment building. As I was walking back, I didn't feel bad or troubled. Instead, I was calm, knowing that I was going to live my life to the fullest until they come and get me. Enough running. This time I was going to face my fate head on, since it has decided to play this cruel game with me wherever I go. And in case I get away again, I was hoping not to kill anyone ever again. And it wasn't like I did those crimes because I wanted to. No, it's people like them who bring out the monsters in someone like me. I'm so sick of people shoving their cameras on others' faces everywhere you go these days. I fumed when I entered the house and went to the kitchen to put the grocery in the refrigerator. "What happened?" Natalie's calm voice reached my ears. I looked around and found her painting her nails on the couch. On a typical day, I would have just let her mind her business and give her a reply with, "Nothing." But today, I was pissed. So I walked to the couch and sat across from her. "You know how I hate being filmed, right?" I was minding my business when this TikToker came out of nowhere and started shooting a reaction video. I told her about my bothersome trip to Walmart. "Relax, it's nothing," she said, without even batting her eyes as she blew on her neatly painted blue nails. Her skills always amused me. Someone who cannot even do this with their right hand. "Nothing, you say? I'm telling you, one of these days I will end up in jail for murdering someone for filming me without consent." My anger hadn't subsided yet. Every time I thought of that incident, I was filled with rage. "Come on, you're overreacting." I wasn't even surprised at her words, since she also had mild symptoms of those TikTokers. She just hadn't evolved into them yet, who goes around disturbing people's lives for their 5 minutes of fame. And I think you people are not reacting enough on this nonsense and letting this get out of hand. Don't you find this absurd and disturbing? Or are you also planning on doing that? The bitterness in my voice was evident, which made her flinch. She got up without replying and went to her room. I don't blame her. I was rather rude to her. Natalie and I have been roommates for over 6 months, but we were still quite indifferent to one another. She would do her thing without disturbing me, and I would do the same. But there were times when we exchanged our opinions on some matters. It would be a brief 5 minutes of discussion. Our personalities were entirely different. She was the kind of popular girl you see in high school, and I, on the other hand, was your introverted nerd who despised attention. When I first saw her, I knew we wouldn't get along, so I set a few rules for us in advance. I didn't expect her to follow, but she did. One night, while sleeping in my room, I heard a faint murmuring voice coming, making me wake up. I rubbed my eyes and grabbed my phone to check the time, and it was 2:07 a.m. Did she finally lose her mind over TikTok? For goodness sake, Natalie, it's wee hours. Who are you people? My face turned pale when I saw 3 masked men instead of her. and one of them had a camera in his hand and was shooting while the other two were putting TV and other valuables from the living room into their bags. "What's going on, Sophie? It's..." Natalie came out of her room rubbing her eyes but froze as her eyes landed on the intruders. I was left dumbfounded when I saw her rushing back into her room and locking it. Did she leave me to face these psychos all by myself? One thing was sure, these people were TikTokers, but I was shocked to see them filming their crime. I was scared they would harm me, but thankfully they never did, and continued to rob me. "Excuse me, you cannot take that. That's my late mom's gift to me." As I rushed to snatch the statue from them, one grabbed me and prevented me from doing so. I continued screaming and begging them to leave our things alone because we couldn't afford to repurchase them. But they continued laughing, filming, and taking things. That was when a few officers rushed inside, and before I knew it, they were arrested. Since the front door was already unlocked, they could have done so. But how? Oh, Natalie. She came out of her room when they removed the masks from their faces, and I was utterly speechless to see they were just teenagers. Their ages must have been around 16 to 18. I wanted to give these three an earful, but I couldn't do that since there wasn't an ounce of remorse on their faces, almost as if they couldn't even see the seriousness of their actions. What if I was some angry man who decided to defend their house and kill one of them? Would they understand then? But for some reason, I couldn't blame these children. Some parents these days neglect their children after giving birth, leading them to be influenced by such useless acts. After the officers took them, I looked at Natalie feeling guilty. "I'm sorry for judging you too soon. I didn't know you went in to call 911. As I stared at the ground, these words came out of my mouth. "Don't mind it. I would have felt the same if I were in your shoes." She turned to her room as she said that. I stared at her back, thinking she wasn't that bad. By the way, those kids were filming it. I followed her to her room door, not only because my room was opposite it, but because I wanted to talk to her after this frightening incident. It's because of this weird trend that's been going on these days. She turned around and showed me on her phone where people were going all out committing crimes and filming it. Were they seriously going this far and destroying their futures for their 5 minutes of fame? I don't think I would be able to sleep anymore. Do you want to grab a drink with me? I wasn't sure if she would accept it, but I asked her anyway. Sure. She turned to the kitchen after saying that and took out 2 bottles of beer. So, why do you use TikTok again? The 2 of us talked till dawn when I learned she wasn't fond of trends either and just used the app for educational purposes, sharing facts about biology and all. The more we talked, the more I found myself relating to her. It's funny how we form our opinions solely on people's appearances and how they carry themselves. I'm sure your opinion might be different, but I learned 2 things that night. How judgmental I was all this time, something I hope never to do again, and TikTok was destroying teenagers' lives and putting others in danger with these strange challenges and trends. Kidnapped. I was hammered the other night, partying with the guys when I heard someone shout, "Let's order some more booze." I looked in that direction, and I think it was Chester. He was my ex-boyfriend, and I have no idea when he got here, so I was a bit confused. Maybe I was imagining him being here. I tried to get up and walk to the bathroom, but I stumbled and was caught by someone before I could fall. Whoever it was, I couldn't recognize him due to my drunken state. But I could tell that he had a jacked body as I touched his chest. I heard a faint voice asking if I was okay before I completely lost all my senses. The next morning, I woke up from a thirst along with a throbbing headache. It almost felt as if I was hit by a rock or something. I tried to look around to find some water, only to realize the unfamiliar surrounding I was in. This wasn't my room. Where in the world was I? Wondering all that, I tried to get up, only to get dumbstruck by another realization. I was naked. I looked around and there was no one else beside me, while my clothes were all over the room. Did I? I shook the thought and started getting dressed up, and then walked out of the room. I remembered partying with my friends, Jack, Sarah, and Henry, and there was Sarah's boyfriend too, but I didn't remember much after getting drunk. How in the world did I end up in someone's bedroom? Did they let me go home with someone else in a drunken state? As I walked down the stairs, thinking of exiting the house, I heard a clicking sound, so I hid while trying to get a peek at who it might be. A well-formed man with olive skin and black hair entered with a McDonald's bag in his hand, and after closing the door, he looked in my direction. Since he had already noticed me, there was no use in hiding, so I got out and told him that I would be leaving. "I don't think so." A mesmerizing, husky voice invaded my ears as he grabbed my hand and yanked me in front of him as I tried to pass by him. What do you think you're doing?" I asked in frustration as I looked into his steel gray eyes. "Finish this first, then we will talk." I won't lie, I was intimidated by him as he gave me command and walked away, but it exasperated me. There was also distress building up, so if I wanted to escape this place safely, I had to do exactly as he said. I took a seat and started devouring the double quarter pounder that he had brought me along with some friends, and since I was already hungry and hungover, I fished everything. Judging by the surrounding, the guy was in his room, so I walked to the front door and tried to open it, only to find it locked. Now, this situation was getting rather unnerving. Why would he do something like that? I understand that I may have gotten carried away last night since I was intoxicated, but he must have known that. This was getting frightening. What was he planning to do? Was he some sort of psychopath who was going to keep me locked in this house? I started imagining all kinds of nerve-wracking scenarios where I could picture something horrible happening to me. There was no way I was going to let this creep have his way, so I tried to look around to find something to use for my defense when my eyes went to cat-shaped ceramic decor. I was startled right after picking it up when I noticed him standing at the end of the hallway while carefully observing me. He didn't look surprised or angry and started walking in my direction. "What do you want?" I barely managed to get those words out when he grabbed the decor from my hand and placed it back in its place. "I was hired to sleep with you, film you, and then ruin you. But before I could do anything, you threw up on me and ruined my mood," he said in a calm, low-tone voice that sent shivers down my spine. "Hired?" I stuttered. It almost felt like a knot was forming in my throat. My steps automatically started backing away from the guy, and tears started to build up out of panic. But instead of doing anything, he sat on the couch and took out his phone without making eye contact with me. Here, the guy was drunk, but he still saved his number in my phone. He showed me the screen, and I could recognize this number anywhere. It was Chester. "Don't worry, I'm not going to do anything to you anymore. I was also drunk last night when I saw you partying with your friends. You seemed hot, so I was going to ask for your number. But then the guy said you were a cheating whore who sleeps with multiple guys and tries to act all righteous, high and mighty in front of the others. He told me he would pay me $1,000 if I did this, so I accepted." The more he spoke, the more angst I was feeling. "Please, just let me go." He flinched as I said that. He slowly got up from the couch while putting his phone back in his pocket and walked toward me at a hair-raising pace. Before I could run away, he grabbed me, threw me on his shoulders, and took me back to the bedroom I woke up this morning. As he threw me on the bed, his steel gray eyes stared straight into my soul, and the look he had was of a maniac. That was when I realized not all handsome, dreamy-looking men come out of fairy tales that we all have heard throughout our childhood, or the situation from a drama or comic where a drunk girl ends up in the same room as a handsome man and the two of them end up falling in love with each other. The look he had at that time when he was glaring at me was not someone a girl would want to be with. It was terrifying enough to make me shake in my shoes, and as he started closing up the distance between us, it was sending me into cold sweat. He grabbed a fist of my hair and said while pulling it, "I said I won't do anything to you, nor was I ever planning to do what the jerk said. But I never said I would let you go." As he said this with chilling low tones, his deep and husky voice wasn't mesmerizing anymore. Instead, it penetrated my ears like nails on a chalkboard as it filled me with terror.
I had recently lost my job due to my severe ADHD, since it was difficult for me to focus and prioritize given tasks, which lead to missed deadlines. There were occasions when I would forget about the meetings planned and end up skipping them unintentionally. As a result, I would get scolded. My symptoms also included impulsiveness and major mood swings that often led to me getting in trouble with my colleagues and seniors. So in the end, they decided to let me go. There was nothing to complain about since I was used to it by now. I was first diagnosed with this condition when I was 4 years old, and ever since then, I came to my senses. I could feel that I was different from the surrounding kids. Fitting in almost others had always been a difficult task for me because I would often burst out in anger without any notice. Didn't matter whether I was in class, social gatherings, or whatnot. I was that much self-aware to understand. People didn't want to be my friends easily, and parents were embarrassed because of me. So I started to try and suppress how I was and copied other people's behaviors to fit in socially and get accepted by them. But as you can see where it led me, I have no job, my bank balance is minimum for me to barely survive this month, and I'm alone in this apartment. Still, there's not a single friend whom I could call or rely on. I have a few things in the storage room that I could try selling to put through another month or two, but after that, I would need a job no matter what. I went to check the storage to see what I could put up for sale, and what I found was an antique radio that was gifted to me 5 years ago, a music system that wasn't needed, and a golf set that I brought to impress my boss in the game. None of them were of my need any longer, and since I needed the money, I put them up for sale on Craigslist. You wouldn't believe me, but there can be very weird people on that website, and all the potential buyers kept asking all these weird questions, thinking I was doing some sort of scam. I managed to sell the music system to a bunch of high school guys at a good price, which I had to deliver to their designated place. They did check it before handing me the money, and it seemed they were satisfied with it. I counted the money, shook hands with them, and went back to my place. The money I got from them was enough for me to scrape for a few days. Now all I needed to do was sell the golf set and the old radio at an equally good price. A man offered me more than what I had in mind on both the items combined, and I agreed upon it since I needed the money. But the problem with the guy was that he was also concerned, just like all the others, that it could be a scam. I assured him that it was legit and said he could send me the money online after I dropped the items off at his house, but he said he didn't trust me and didn't want me to know his address. Saying that, I understood his concern. I told him that he could come to pick him up at my place, but the man seemed hesitant even at the suggestion. After a few phone calls, he said he would get back to me and tell me when he would be comfortable doing that. He even asked for my address, and I didn't think much of it, and I shared it with him. I called him back that evening, but his number was turned off. Thinking there must be a reason for that, I let it go and started chatting with other potential buyers, since hanging on to a single customer would be foolish. That evening, as I was having dinner, my doorbell rang, so I got up and went to open the door. The moment I did, I saw two men with masks standing outside. I hesitantly asked what they wanted, and as I responded, I was hit with something hard by one of them. Everything started going dark as I started to lose consciousness right then and there. I was in some senses when I felt someone drag me somewhere, but I was hit too hard to be able to move my body and will. After hours of passing out completely, I woke up with a throbbing pain in my head. As I put my hand over my head, I felt a soaked cotton, probably a sloppy attempt to stop the bleeding by someone. By who? That was when I remembered that I was hit by someone, so I stood up and walked to the bathroom to see the bleeding bump on my head. The bleeding was a bare minimum, but by the looks of it, it still needed treatment. I looked around the house, but I couldn't find anyone inside. And then I realized that a few things around the house were missing. Obviously things such as the TV being gone and a few other electronics from the kitchen and around the house were missing. As I walked to the bedroom, I noticed it to be completely ransacked. But since any valuable items in there were already sold by me, the only thing they took was the table lamp and an empty metal box, which I often used to put a few spare change in there. Guess finding it locked might have made them think that there was something valuable inside. The antique radio and the golf set were also gone, and now there was nothing left for me to sell. Since I couldn't afford to go to the hospital, I performed first aid on myself as I had all the necessary things in there. I wondered why they didn't kill me and just leave like that. Maybe their main objective was to only rob me. That was a bummer. Now I was not only broke, but robbed as well. The only thing they couldn't take was the money that I got from selling the music system. I never heard from that man who offered to buy those things, and only then did I put two and two together and figured that he might be the one who planned this robbery. Should have known before sharing my address that his offer was too good to be true. After reporting this to the police, I went ahead to look for a job online. There was nothing else I could do anymore to survive but to get whatever petty job I could find and earn my living. I got the night shift at McDonald's. I had to start it. I had been living through the foster homes for most of my life, and some were good, but some were really bad. They were messy, and sometimes a lot of them were straight up abusive, and it was a system that I wanted to get out of. I wasn't going to spend my days living in a house that probably doesn't want me, so I decided to fend for myself. I was going to be 18 in a few months. That would mean I would be out in the world without any safety net. So I was training myself to the real horrors of the world from when I was 15. And that is when I got the night shift at the McDonald's. I thought the best way to learn about all these horror would night. Then the weirdest of creatures all tread to do all kind of sinister things. The first month working there was pretty cool. The sinister element that I exaggeratingly thought of wasn't really there. It was mostly sketchy people and characters looking odd and lurking in the dark alleyways, smoking and drinking. But nothing ever happened that could be said sinister. I waited all night. I was doing less of the work that I was giving and lurking more outwardly to the windows in hopes that something nasty would happen and I would get to experience it and know about it. I was naive in the approach of it, all like a kid excited by all the anticipation. I was almost every moment on an alert, trying to look out for trouble. One day, one of the men who was a regular customer to this McDonald's joint said, "Boy, you always look out in those alleyways from the window. Why are you doing that?" And I told him, "I'm just looking for trouble. I want to experience the rush." And he said, "Oh, you a kid right now. You don't look for trouble. Trouble finds you. And then it won't be the rush you feel, but shock and pain. Trouble is nasty and unpredictable like that." I looked at the old man and took in his words. He wasn't wrong about that. I was doing my usual day shift when Miguel, who was a regular too, came in and greeted me. "What's up, homeboy? What we cooking today? Can I get them nuggets and that OG Big Mac?" He was with a girl, and his arm was around her waist. She was a curvy woman, and his hands were busy caressing her curves. And then he looked at me, noticing his girl, and he said, "That's right, G, you can look at her. She fine as hell." And I smiled at him, and he knew that I was harmless. And then he started kissing her in front of the counter. The McDonald's only had them two and the old man in today, so it was just me and the kitchen crew, and the old man and Miguel and his girl. It was very quiet there, and only noise that was heard was the aggressive kissing noises of Miguel and his girl. I called in the order of the old man, and he took the order and sat down on the table, and he said, "Can I get some more of the Szechuan hot sauce, boy?" And I replied wittingly, "Seems like you are the one looking for trouble, huh?" The old man laughed, and he took the sauce and sat on the very seat he was at. Then a few minutes and Miguel's order was ready, but he just won't buzz. They had been kissing for 10 minutes now, and then I said the only thing he ever called me was I looked at him and called him, "Yo, Miguel, my G, your order is ready." Miguel was smiling as he came over to pick up the order, and we clicked fingers and they all sat down enjoying their meal. Miguel with his girl, the old man with his newspaper. The kitchen staff was working on the inside, and I was standing alone on the counter, thinking of scenarios. And suddenly, somebody walked through the door, and then two other followed. It was a moment of rush, and I realized what is going on. The old man dropped his burger and looked at me, and it seemed like he was trying to talk to me with his eyes, telling me, "Boy, the trouble found you." The three men came in with a shotgun, hurling it in the air, and took 2 shots in the window and said, "Act smart, you die. Do as you're told." One of the men, probably the boss, came towards me and handed me a bag and said, "Drop in all the cash in here." And I replied, "The bag is too big." He looked confused and said, "The hell you said? You just do as you're told." So I did. I took the cash and dropped all of it in his bag. I knew it was too light and the bag still had space, so instead of all the money, I dropped in paper napkins in his bag. I filled it with paper napkins and tied the bag before handing it to him. He looked at me and said, "All right, now get us 3 Big Macs and 2 cold ones." I replied, "We don't have beer, sir." He looked at me and said, "Coke will do." And I got their order ready and very calmly said, "Your order is ready." And at this point, they were circling around Miguel and his girl. I took their order and went to their table and said, "Sir, your order is ready." And the man said, "What are you waiting for? A thank you note? Get out of my face, asshole." He nudged me away as his hand was caressing Miguel's girlfriend. And then from the distance I said, "Sir, your order has been done for go. You can take your order, it is packed." I guess the man was angry and annoyed by me intruding him and his boys trying to molest that girl. The man jumped forward, forgetting about Miguel, and took his shotgun and placed it right in between my eyes. "Would it be worth dying for McDonald's? Tell me, asshole." And then I said, "I've made your order for go. The store a block down has called in the police. They heard the shotguns. So if you leave right now, you can make it out without chase with all that cash and a nice McDonald's meal. I've also put the Happy Meal toy in." He looked at me, and I guess he was intimidated by the calmness he could see in my eyes, like I was the no bullshit guy. And he calmed down, propped his gun, looked at his boys and said, "All right, let's scoot. We're done here, boys. Let's go." They left. I was calm and chill. The old man looked at me and said, "You either have massive balls or you just a psychopath." Miguel looked at me and appreciated me through his eyes. I comforted his girlfriend, got her the nice hot beverage we made in the kitchen, and her next meal was on us. The old man looked at me and said, "Boy, trouble got nothing on you." He looked at the cash register and paid me a tip. I returned to it. "Go on, take it. You just got robbed." I smiled at him and said, "The store got robbed. I am fine." They all definitely not forgetting the night at the McDonald's, and neither will those 2 idiots who think there's money in their bag. At least they will have enough napkins to wipe their ass in jail. The owner never understood why I left even after hailing a hero and being promoted. Well, you see, when I was filling the bag of the thieves with napkins, I filled another envelope with all the cash. So the reality of the trouble was that the burglars got away with the napkins, while I got away with all the cash. That was just a little heist that I pulled off in McDonald's when I was 15. I have a lot of stories about such hustles. I am 30 now, almost 15 years from my first hustle, the hustle at McDonald's. I got $2,500 from it. And now the new hustle that I am doing will cash me in $25 million. So yes, if trouble is looking for me, Tell it I'm on an island on the coast of Greece.
In June of 2020, a TikTok user with the username UgHenry decided that he and a few friends would use TikTok to record themselves going on an adventure. It was an adventure that was based around the popular adventure app Randonautica. Upon opening the app, Randonautica asks you to share your location. Then it will ask you to choose which type of point you would like to generate, be it a void or an anomaly, before fetching coordinates using a random number generator. The user can then open that location in Google Maps to begin their journey. Randonautica adventures were something of a meme at the time, and many other TikTok users were uploading videos of themselves using the app. Given that some journeys had ended with some rather creepy occurrences, UgHenry decided to give Randonautica a try himself. And so Henry and his two friends spent their afternoon following a series of apparently randomly generated coordinates around their hometown of Seattle. The keyword they entered into Randonautica app was travel, so when the app pointed them in the direction of Alley Avenue Southwest, a street right next to the shoreline of Elliott Bay, they figured the ocean was their final clue. But when they arrived at their destination, they found something disturbingly relevant lying on the rocks near the water. It was a suitcase, and in particular, a travel case. Like many people at the time, Henry and his friends were almost convinced that there was a kind of magic at work with Randonautica. Scores of other randonauts found the endings to their journey to be far too fitting or poetic to be purely random or coincidental, and now Henry was one of them, and he had a potential viral video to go with it. But Henry's video is about to go viral for considerably more sinister reasons, because as they approached the travel case, they began to smell something rotten in the air, and the situation was about to take a decidedly dark turn. At first, Henry and his friends simply laughed off the smell, thinking it either came from one of them or from something washed up further down the beach. They continued to film the bag, with one of them prodding it a little before telling the others how heavy it seemed. One of the people in the video jokes about the contents being rotten groceries, hence the smell. But after another makes a quip about the contents being cash, it's only a matter of time before one of the friends decides to open the case. But as soon as they do, the god-awful stench in the air becomes even more intense, so much so that the friends begin retching and gagging off camera. It was only when they saw the stuffed trash bags inside the case that they began to fear the worst. And after calling 911 and having some cops check out the travel case, the worst fears were confirmed. Inside the travel case were 2 dead bodies, one male, one female. UgHenry wrote that he broke down the moment he got home after finding the suitcase. He added that his laughter in the video was his way of trying to get through the situation, and said he has since then been unable to sleep. The TikTok video of Henry's morbid discovery earned him more than 15 million views, and fueled the speculation that the Randonautica app was somehow cursed. But outside of the paranormal speculation, a very real investigation was launched into how these 2 dead bodies came to end stuffed inside of a travel case. According to a post-mortem examination performed by the King County Medical Office, based on the state of decomposition, 35-year-old Jessica Lewis and her 27-year-old boyfriend Austin Wenner were shot and killed on or around June 9th, just days before they were found. Police then set about questioning those closest to the couple, one of which was their landlord, 62-year-old Michael Dudley, who rented the top floor of his large home to them. On the night of their killing, neighbors reportedly heard a man yelling, "Please don't do this, just let me leave," before gunshots were fired. During his questioning, many of Michael's answers seemed inconsistent or cagey, and was overly nervous during the conversation when he apparently had no reason to be so. It was just enough for the police to focus their suspicions on him, and they quickly obtained a search warrant for the house that both Michael and the murdered couple called home. During their search, law enforcement discovered bullet holes in one of the walls, blood in the couple's bedroom, and a fresh coat of paint on a random part of a banister. When the police confronted him regarding their findings, Michael claimed that he'd heard Jessica had somehow managed to cut herself and denied the bullet holes even being there. He was promptly arrested, then taken to a holding cell to await further questioning. There has been plenty of media speculation as to why exactly Michael Dudley would shoot the young couple, but one source has suggested that the straw that broke the camel's back was their inability to make rent payments. Outside of that, there are plenty of skeletons in Michael's closet that suggest deep-rooted violent proclivities. One media outlet discovered a history of interfamilial relations and carnal abuse when they came across an assault restraining order filed against Michael by his own daughter in June of 2018. Some court documents are said to have read, "My father indecently assaulted me for 9 years, from age 10 until age 18, forcing me to share a bed with him from age 10 while he'd play adult movies on the TV. I don't feel safe in my home or leaving my home to work." His daughter also added that Michael had a very disturbing habit, a ritual in which he would take out his pistol and threaten to use it on her. Gina Yeshka, Jessica's aunt, said she was close with her niece before she died. Gina told the media that her knowledge of Michael Dudley more or less lines up with the allegations made by his daughter. Sometimes he would break their car so they couldn't leave, she said. He put trackers on people's cars. Anytime he ever got in a dispute with anybody, he would tell them to leave but try to lock them in the house. But most horrifying of all, according to Gina, Michael had another disturbing tendency: cruelty towards animals that couldn't protect themselves. He killed the dog in front of them and left the carcass outside for 3 days to scare them, Gina continued. They had nowhere to go. That's why they stayed there. He beat this dog to death with a hammer because it got one of his chickens. He just left it out there for the other dogs to look at and sniff. He's a freaking psycho. She also said the loss of her niece, a mother of 4, and her niece's longtime boyfriend has all but destroyed their families. I don't want them to be remembered in any violent way. I want them to be remembered for their humanity and their kindness. I want to believe they didn't suffer. Michael himself has been taken into custody, but evidence suggests that someone might well go unpunished for their involvement in Jess and Austin's murders. During the post-mortem of their dismembered bodies, the coroner observed that the slices and hacks around their joints were disorganized and appeared to be done in different manners with various devices. The police spokesperson also mentioned that after dismembering his victims, Michael had apparently set about dispersing their bodies in multiple bags throughout various bodies of water, and given the time frame and placement of the bags, it is unlikely that Michael did this alone. This means that there could well be someone just walking around Seattle, a free individual, who helped cut up and dispose of 2 innocent young people, a loving couple who could possibly have been executed over nothing more than a late rent payment. After his arrest, Michael's bail was set to $3 million, with the judge citing his willingness to commit horrific acts of violence. The process of dismemberment would have taken a lot of time and effort, and his willingness to take these extreme steps demonstrates the threat he poses to the community, charging documents read. It appears that Michael is indeed guilty of Jess and Austin's murder, and it's more than likely that he'll go to prison for a very long time. But it was TikTok that made them famous. Millions of people all over the world learned of such barbaric acts because of a simple video messaging app. Big tech companies like Facebook or Twitter might like to think that every so often social media brings a little light into our lives. Yet it seems that every so often, apps like TikTok can bring a little darkness into our lives too. A little background on me. I'm a 19-year-old male and I was traveling with my girlfriend. We were on a road trip to visit my grandparents who lived a few states away. They said we could stay at their place for a few weeks over the summer, and it seemed like a no-brainer because they lived on the beach. The path to getting there, though, was really long and it was a painful drive. My girlfriend and I both disliked driving, but we figured that we could take turns and it wouldn't be so miserable. I think the total time on the road was about 10 hours. We were about 5 hours into the drive when we decided to stop off at a rest stop. I'm not going to lie to you. We stopped quite a bit. I'm a little compulsive with drinking water because I like to stay hydrated. As you might imagine, there are some consequences of being hydrated. It irritated my girlfriend, but not very much. I think she secretly liked that we were stopping on my sake and not hers, because she always seemed to buy something every time we stopped. This one rest area was not horrible or anything, wasn't in a bad area or anything like that. It seemed like a very typical, safe rest stop. But this is where one of the most horrifying experiences of my life took place, at least the first part of it. This has simply been one of the many times when I had to pull off the road to go pee. When I saw that there was also a McDonald's near this one rest area, I decided to wait until we got there. I normally don't eat McDonald's, but I let myself do it on special occasions like road trips. It makes the drive go by a little better, even if it makes my stomach feel like garbage. So, I went to the bathroom and she bought more cigarettes. We had already made our way to the McDonald's when we had our first appearance with Creepy Guy. We actually did talk to him a little bit. Let's call him Joe. Joe may have been the strangest looking man I'd ever laid my eyes on. He looked like he didn't come from this country or something. And not on a racial basis or anything, he just looks like he had a completely different lifestyle, as if he lived off the land and had never used electricity. His beard went all the way down to his stomach, and if you looked at it for long enough, you could see food particles in there, and some of them not even from a meal that he had eaten that day. So that should give you a good idea of his level of cleanliness. The rest of his outfit followed suit. A dark pair of jeans that look like they hadn't been washed in a decade, and a large leather jacket that looks like the oldest thing I've ever seen in my life. I'm sure it actually wasn't that old, but it had a timely appearance to it due to it being in such poor condition. Anyway, we spoke to Joe because he awkwardly sat next to us at McDonald's. I thought this was extremely strange, and it definitely weirded me out. I'm an introvert by nature, and talking to people is extremely taxing. My girlfriend is an extrovert and always attracted people that were interested in conversation. I just found it strange because I've never had someone randomly sit at the same table as me when they were complete strangers. I figured that it was because my girlfriend attracted talkers, but looking back, it was probably because we appeared to be easy targets. Joe sat down right next to my girlfriend and started asking us where we were going. My girlfriend, being the optimistic and unsuspecting person that she is, gave him the entire story, that we were basically 5 hours away from anyone that we knew in any direction. I tried to give her a look that she needed to shut up, but she didn't get the hint. We had already ordered our food and we were eating when he sat down. He didn't order anything, he just invited himself to our table and talked to us for the entire time we were there. At first he was rather polite, but had a really thick accent that didn't seem like it belonged anywhere. I couldn't tell you where the accent came from because I've never heard anything like it in my life, and this is coming from someone who knows plenty of people from the North, Midwest, the South, Australia, and anywhere else. This accent just didn't seem like it came from Earth. After a painful experience of trying to get away from Joe, we got back in our car and started up on that journey again. As we got to our car, I also noticed that Joe had gotten into his car as well. As we had pulled out, Joe was a good distance away from us. I thought this was extremely strange, and the warning sign in my head went from flashing to high alert. I knew that we were in some kind of danger. I was driving and I tried putting the pedal to the metal. The next half hour or so, I had probably sped more than I did my entire life. I was normally a really safe driver, but this guy was really freaking me out. I tried telling my girlfriend that this guy was tailing us, but she didn't believe me. She thought I was just being paranoid. But what are the odds of seeing this guy at a gas station and then him being behind us for 30 minutes after we got on the road? She told me to pull over at the next rest stop and we would know for sure if he was trying to do us harm. Stupidly, that's exactly what I did. And my worst suspicion was true. He pulls off at the same rest stop and parked right next to us. My adrenaline was rushing as I got ready to fight this guy. I didn't know what else I could do. I told my girlfriend to call the police and then I got out of the car. He was easily a foot taller than me, and he was a little older and probably not in the best shape. I had the benefit of being an athlete wannabe at my college. I did all the intramural sports stuff like that, so I was in pretty decent shape, but none of that mattered when Joe pulled out a knife. the understanding that he was out to do us harm and I was going to have to fight him. I waited for him to approach. About 30 seconds went by before he started walking in my direction. My heart was pounding. I started screaming every insult that I could. I called him a degenerate and an old man who was in way over his head, and then I was about to whoop him. It didn't scare him, though, and when he got within 10 feet of me, I thought it would be a good idea to tackle him. I was hoping to take him by surprise, but I didn't. I tried getting him off of his feet and onto the floor, but when I tackled him, he plunged the knife right into my back. But that was the only good hit he got on me. I managed to get him on the floor, and after that, I started kicking his head ferociously. I don't know how I managed to do it, but he was on the ground seemingly unconscious, and I was standing there. I could feel the blood flowing down my back, and I got back into the backseat of my car and yelled at my girlfriend to drive me to the nearest hospital. I was questioned a few days later at the hospital about what had happened. I guess the police showed up after we had left and found Joe still there unconscious. He was in a coma, and the police didn't know what to think. Once they got mine and my girlfriend's version of the story, they seemed to believe it, and so that was that. I don't know when or if Joe will ever wake up from that coma. And honestly, after he almost killed me, I kinda hope he doesn't. That was an extremely traumatic experience for me and my girlfriend. The good news about the situation is that I can tell people that I put someone in a coma once, and if they don't listen to me, they're next.
The man born as Frank Rostam Rashawn would eventually go by Andre Rand during his adult life, but the name on his driver's license has become somewhat irrelevant as his terrifying exploits would be attached to a deceptively playful nickname born in New York City on March 11th of 1944. Rand would spend most of his life around Staten Island, going on to be one of the most infamous criminals that the Northeast has ever known. And although Rand definitely wasn't the most prolific serial killer, it's more the nature of his crimes that made him so universally reviled. You see, Andre Rand's prey of choice was children. Thankfully, Andre Rand is currently serving several consecutive 25 years of life sentences, but the convicted kidnapper and suspected child serial killer managed to wreak enough havoc and inflict enough pain in his time that his capture and imprisonment provided very little solace, yet bizarrely, the man's morbidly fascinating tale began as a real-world campfire story, and days gone by, young people all over the borough of Staten Island would scare the living daylights out of each other with the description of the monstrous figure known only as Cropsey, supposedly a sort of boogeyman figure with the razor-sharp steel hook for a hand. Cropsey would apparently drag innocent children from their home in the middle of the night before carrying them to an abandoned hospital, where depending on who was telling the story, you would be tortured, killed, eaten, or any combination of the three. Although creepy campfire and urban legends are a standard, a thrilling part of most everyone's early childhood for the children of Staten Island, these ominous little tales soon became disquietly real. The line between fact and fiction began to blur as local children began to vanish in real life. But when their cold, dead bodies were found, it made it clear that this was no mere campfire tale. Could it be that Cropsey was real during the 1960s? Andre Rand was employed as a custodian. The Willowbrook State School Fund by state government, the Willowbrook was a charitable center that provided aid for children with disabilities on the surface. All of the Willowbrook's practices were good and proper, but upon closer inspection, state officials began to unravel a web of unquestionable conditions and unethical medical practices. On the advice of the inspectors, the Willowbrook was immediately closed, and Andre Rand was forced to find alternative employment. Rand at a clean slate, he could have pursued just about to any manner of unskilled labor, but instead, they chose to pursue an even more horrifying career between the dates of the Willowbrook's closing in the early 1970s. Several young girls went missing in the area surrounding the abandoned hospital. The first was a 5-year-old Alicia Piera on July 10, 1972. The happy-go-lucky toddler seemed to simply vanish into thin air while playing in the street. just outside her house, a street located just a few miles southeast of the old Willbrook Hospital. For a while, the whereabouts of the small child remained a complete mystery if there was something else the local townsfolk were unaware of, that Andre Rand once went by Frank Rashawn. Frank Rashawn had once served 10 months in prison, but the abduction of several small children, the fact he did 10 months stems from the fact that his defense attorney managed to essentially haggle a judge down to a conviction of false imprisonment, a crime with a considerably lower penalty than kidnap or abduction, but the conviction was enough to smear Frank's name for good. And so, we came up with the rather simple and cunning solution. They changed it, and after moving to Staten Island, became Andre Rand. Yet, as much as Rand could hide his identity from the townsfolk, he couldn't hide his identity from police officers who were well aware of his legal change of name. So when little Alicia Piero went missing on the warm July evening, the police considered Rand to be the prime suspect, despite their conviction's evidence was flimsy and not nearly enough to gain a solid conviction in a court of law. And so, as the cops chose to hold their horses, the bodies began to pile up. On July 15, 1981, 7-year-old Holly Ann Hughes went missing. Her parents filed a missing persons report, while several witnesses claimed to have seen the girl with Iran shortly before her disappearance. Once again, no actual evidence led to no actual arrests 2 years later. Rand once again becoming the prime suspect when 11-year-old Tice Johnson disappeared. Then, in 1984, 21-year-old Hank Jaffario vanished. These unnerving accidents left the nearby townsfolk racked with terror, a terror that was exacerbated by the fact that not a single person was apprehended with all of the laws for a potential motive. It was a whopping 3 years before local law enforcement finally caught a break in their investigation. 12-year-old girl Jennifer Swagger was reported missing on July 9th of 1987. The search for her or her body lasted 35 days and ended in the traumatic unearthing of her body in a wooded area on Staten Island, according to the New York Times. Swagger was found dead in a shallow grave on the former property of the Willboro State School. By the time Jenny Swagger's body was found, police decided they had to act, and Andre Rand was arrested and charged as a suspect in the murder once again prosecutors felt afoul of. Court procedure and found they were unable to convict Rand on the murder charge, with there only being enough evidence to irrefutably convict him of kidnapping. This was 1988. Prosecutors had Rand exactly where they wanted him, in a federal penitentiary, where he'd stew while they worked on convicting him of the other children murders, although there wasn't enough evidence at the time Rand was found guilty of Holly and Hughes kidnapping in 2004. Over 2 decades after she originally went missing, and since there is no statute of limitations for New York for first-degree kidnapping, prosecutors ensured that Rand wouldn't escape justice for his historic depravities. It was given an additional 25 years of life sentence on top of the one he had already served. All in all, the Staten Island boogeyman sits behind bars to this day for the kidnapping of Holly and Hughes and Jennifer Swagger, and won't be eligible for parole until 2037. Provided he lives that long, it'll be 93 years old, and the day he walks free, Andre Rand's deserving life and legacy were dissected in the 2019 documentary film Cropsey. The film premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival that year and won the Grand Jury Prize for its enthralling narrative and slick production quality. And I'm watching it, it's easy to see why the essential premise of the movie was to explore whether or the Staten Island urban legend of Cropsey was actually tied into Iran's mysterious career. Whether one had fed into the other until the fact and fiction had become indistinguishable. Yet, as the movie came to show for some of the people who experienced those years on Staten Island as well as those involved in searching for the missing kids, the term boogeyman didn't even broach Rand's despicable psychopathy. Donna Conto, president of the charity Friends of the Jennifer for Missing Children, calls Rand the Hannibal Lecter of Staten Island. Donna and her fellow volunteers have the unenviable task of searching Oliver, Willowbrook's 385-acre twice a year in search of any undiscovered remains. He terrified a whole community, and he still haunts us, Donna was quoted. As saying for some kids, it's like if Cropsey was real. What else are they telling us and I don't know sometimes? I feel a little of that too at the end. Andre Rand was arrested, imprisoned, and may never see the light of day again. But nevertheless, his impact on the Staten Island community is immeasurable, and Cropsey has left behind massive traumatical trauma that may well last for generations. Some of those children are still missing. The remains are so out there somewhere, and as the years go by and their bones are pulled one by one from the cold earth, entombing them, the memories of Rand's reign of terror will come back flooding over and over again. And maybe that's what makes the Cropsey story so well and truly terrifying. The core lesson in the story, the frightful foundation of its message, is that the boogeyman is real and he wears the faces of men.